Hey folks, the Ares Starfighter is an anti-capital ship platform built by Crusader Industries. To accomplish this, they've built a heavy fighter around a massive size 7 gun that comes in two flavors, a ballistic Gatling variant for the Inferno and a laser cannon variant for the Ion. Other than the gun and the paint scheme, the ships are identical. Despite being designed to take out capital ships, their role is still a heavy fighter, so they're extremely formidable at taking out non-capital ships. So much so that they can actually dominate at VHRT bounties. Let's get into it. We'll start off by showing how the Inferno does with its massive size 7 ballistic Gatling. We're starting against a Valkyrie, which is the easiest target for the Inferno because of how large of a target it is. The Gatling is outputting a massive 4700 DPS without using any capacitor, so we can afford to keep our cap on thrusters and liberally use our boosts to enable us to help track our target. And as you can see, at that extremely close range of 200 to 300 meters, it didn't take long since most of our shots landed on target. Weapon spread is an issue with the Inferno though, so you really can't use its 2.8k range too well because at that distance a lot of your shots won't hit VHRT size targets since we're meant to be firing at capital ships. You can see here how little damage we're actually doing to this hurricane that we're shooting at outside of 2k range. So we take advantage of our strong forward thrust to temporarily raise the speed limit to quickly close distance, and then put it back to the SCM speed limit so that we can maneuver at our max capability since we'll need it to track this hurricane. As I'm trying to track them as they're flying past, you can see that I'm using my boost to help me turn faster, and I'm also rotating so that rather than turning to the side, I'm pitching up since that takes advantage of my strong bottom thrusters. And thanks to that positioning, we had a clean shot to take out the hurricane. That just leaves the Warden for some cleanup, so we roll over and pitch up to sight him and start unloading once I see that he's presented his large flat surface to the axis that the bullets will be impacting him from, since we're likely to get hits even if the targeting indicator isn't showing exactly green. It doesn't take too long before we take him out. I also wanted to show a quick clip that highlights an issue that I see with the Inferno for VHRTs, and that has to do with the amount of visual noise that comes from the sparks of all the bullets hitting the target. At medium to long range, it's hard to visually tell whether your bullets are landing on the target and creating those sparks, or if the sparks are actually your bullets flying past the target and missing. I know you have audio hit indicators as well, but it's just something that I wanted to note, since even though you have ammo worth 3 minutes of firing time, it's still limited. Now let's take the Ion for a spin with its absolute beast of a laser cannon. With the capacitor set to max weapons, you'll be outputting 3100 sustained DPS, which is a chunk lower than the Inferno, but in practice it feels like you can actually apply your damage better in the Ion, especially at range. This thing fires slow at 38 rounds per minute, but does almost 6,000 damage per shot, which is crazy. For context, light fighters have 3,000 shields or less. Here we're up against a hurricane, and I'm going to do my best to get some shots on it as it flies past me. I let it get behind me, which isn't great, but I pitch over to it and start to back and side strafe to open up the angle to give myself more leeway to line up some shots. I'm using a lag pip here, so I can just focus on where the hurricane actually is and try and fire at that location rather than trying to worry about chasing its jittery target where a lead pip might show me that it's going. We made quick work of that hurricane even though it got behind us. The second hurricane isn't really moving due to server lag, so we can use it to show off the DPS against a stationary target. Boom, 3 hits. Here we're up against another hurricane. It's a relatively small target, so I move in a bit to close the distance and make it easier to hit my shots. I've personally found it more effective to pull the trigger the second the shot gets lined up rather than holding down the button and trying to keep constantly aligned. In my opinion, this is a significant advantage of the Ion over the Inferno because in a heavy fighter, keeping your guns trained on the enemy consistently is challenging, whereas the Ion gets a 6k payday just for pulling the trigger at the right moment. And the Ion has got the same projectile speed as the Inferno's Gatling, so they're on even terms when it comes to how much you need to lead the target. In this last bit of combat, we're against 2 Valkyries and a Warden. I accidentally came in a little bit too hot while closing the distance, but I rotate and pitch and thrust upwards to keep it in my sights, and I'm able to take it out. We lock up our next target, and he's about 6k out, so we raise our SCM speed limit to close the distance, and I'll cut ahead to save some time. So we just got to the edge of our weapon range, so we start firing while we continue slowing down to our SCM speed. It's important to control distance with the Starfighter, since we're not so agile that you can easily turn around if they end up getting behind us. And we pop him while more than 1k out still. So now we search for our last target, which I believe is a Valkyrie, and lock him up and see that he's at 1k range and they're moving towards us. The velocity text in the red under his target is positive when they're closing the distance and negative when they're moving away. And so we'll use this to help us control the distance to not have them get too close, since we're not very maneuverable. But if it does happen, just do what we're doing here and rotate yourself so that you can track them and fight them by pitching your ship and thrusting upwards. Since the weapons on these ships are locked and not changeable, we only need to talk about the components. I'd recommend swapping the default shields to grade A shields to get more health and faster recharge rates, and also to swap the missiles to EM missiles, since all ships have large EM signatures in 315 due to stealth being nerfed. If you want, you can change your missile racks to get more missiles. I prefer to get as many as I can, so I've gone with the 582 racks to get 16 size 2 missiles. You get no benefit from changing the power plant or the cooler, so leave them alone. And the quantum drive is pretty good since it's already a military grade C, but if you want to be perfectionist about it, you can buy the XL1 for 95k. So let's talk a bit about the ships. These ships are strangely versatile in their capacitor allotment, since you don't really need to put the cap to weapons for VHRT missions. The Inferno has Ballistix, so it doesn't use capacitor for weapons at all, and with the Ion you can easily kill a VHRT target with the 16 rounds you get in your magazine when you have full cap to shields or thrusters. Those 16 shots are worth about 112,000 damage, so even if you were to miss 75% of your shots, you still have more than enough to kill a Hurricane. Sure, for prolonged engagements you may need to recharge that energy magazine once or twice, but that takes less than 4 seconds. So you can use this to your advantage by boosting much more liberally while turning, since you can keep the capacitor to thrusters just like with the Inferno. As for shields, I did 23 VHRT missions with the Ion and the Inferno, and I never once had to disengage to recharge my shields. We have 2 size 2 shields and really high DPS, so we're easily capable of winning the battle of attrition and killing them before they kill us, even if we just sit there and slug it out. The lowest I got was 33% shields in one fight, where I simultaneously took on 2 Hurricanes and a Valkyrie. One other nice touch for these ships is that they both contain a little personal storage compartment at the back of the ship, similar to a Gladius. You get 250k micro SCU of storage there, which is the least you get in any ship, but it's better than nothing. You also get a separate gun rack just below it, so you can do some FPS missions and come back with some loot. The primary negatives I see about the Starfighter is that you can only see 2 MFDs in your cockpit with the default view. You have the typical sluggish handling of a heavy fighter, and you can have a pretty annoying humming sound in the cockpit, but I think there's been bugs filed for that last one, so hopefully it gets changed soon. So that leaves us with how they differ. Other than the infinite energy ammo of the Ion versus the limited ballistic ammo of the Inferno, I want to talk about the damage and aiming characteristics of those weapons. With the Ion, you get to play like a sniper and just line up your targeting for a split second at a time to get big alpha damage, whereas the Inferno struggles because you need to track your target steadily over whatever trajectory they're taking to steadily accumulate damage, which can be hard to do because you're in a heavy fighter. It's also much harder to work with the Gatling in a desync situation, since who knows what the server thinks you're aiming at while you're wasting your ammo. The Inferno also feels like its Gatling has a bit more spread than the Ion, and that compounds the other aiming issues. There's just no avoiding that sinking feeling you get when you just see a stream of your ballistic shots missing and flying off into space. So for all these reasons, I'm going to recommend an Ion. The Inferno is still a great ship, but in my opinion, the Ion is an overpowered ship. So I'm going to compare ships to the Ares Ion here, because if you're looking to make money from bounty hunting, it's my strong preference over the Inferno. First, let's compare it to who I claim used to be the king of bounty hunting, the Vanguard Sentinel. The Ion has similar mobility to the Sentinel while having about 50% more sustained DPS than it, and it has the same shields. The Sentinel also has split range between its size 5 cannon and the size 2 MVSA cannons, so it needs to get to about 1200 meters to be doing its full damage. The other main contender is the Constellation series. The Connies are capable of 23% more sustained DPS than the Ares Ion, but just like the Sentinel, the Connie's weapons have different ranges. Half the Connie's guns are size 4, so they only have 1200 meter range, and the Connie is much less agile and will struggle to effectively track its targets at lower ranges compared to the Starfighter. It does have more shielding though, although that's offset by its inability to easily disengage from a fight and its much larger size. Because of this, for a solo pilot, I think the Ares Ion is the new king of VHRT bounties. It can even do ERT bounties if you control your range. I've actually done this on a low population server where the AI was actually fighting back, and it's not hard to do with the Starfighter. So it's safe to say that this ship has alphaed its way into my heart and even into my hangar. I've actually traded in my Connie Taurus for this, since trading in-game isn't very profitable right now and I can just use the Ares Ion to more efficiently buy myself a Connie in-game. I'm a solo player, and the Ares is a ship that lets solo players shine. Thanks for watching, folks. I hope you've liked this video. Cheers.